Hello and welcome to part 4 of painting the Purge. This time we're going to have a look at the big bad itself, the live one. I'm going to show you 3 ways to paint it, starting with the old school. So this is my original paint job for the live one, when I first got my Core Space Kickstarter set about 4 years ago. It's quite a simple one, I'll take you through the process. I started with a base coat of Death Guard Green. It's a nice desaturated green that matches the flesh of the live one. And as you can see here, that's what I used, painting and undercoating all of the areas of skin. Straight after that, I moved into a wash, just to pick out the darker areas. It's an easy way of painting. Wash went straight over the top, goes into the crevices. The next stage is to use Screamer Pink to base coat all of the robes, and then a wash goes over the top of them as well, and that wash in this case was Carroburg Crimson. So let's see how that holds up against the original artwork. As you can see, the skin tones and the robe tones are quite muted colours. The skin's looking like a really desaturated grey-green there, and the final finish that I ended up with was quite a lot brighter than that. So let's have a look at a new way of painting it, which gives us more desaturated colours. Right, so we're going to start properly by getting rid of all the mould lines. I'm just using my hobby knife in this case to scrape those mould lines off. After that, I found a couple of little tags on the miniature that I didn't like at the bottom of the robes, so I used my Gundam clippers to get rid of those. It's not too difficult a job really, I had to clean it up with a knife afterwards. To make the painting easier later, I've gone round and deepened a lot of the lines on the miniature, just using my scribing chisel here, working in especially these ones on the front where you're going to see the divisions there in the strips of the robes. And then a really good clean with a toothbrush because it's absolutely covered in dust and chippings. So here we go, cleaned up, ready for undercoating. For my undercoat, I'm using Vallejo brush on primer. I usually use this through the airbrush, but I've tried it with the brush this time just so I can do the whole miniature without an airbrush, and it's fine. It takes a couple of coats. It's usually just one coat through the airbrush, but a couple of coats, leave it to dry as long as you can, you get a good solid undercoat. For my base layer, I'm using Hull Red. It's a brownish dark red colour which serves as a great underlay for the green and for the red robes. I'm brushing it on quite thick, trying to keep my brush strokes going vertically straight up and down, mostly down, because I want to leave just a few little black areas like in the eyes, perhaps right underneath the bottoms of the robe as well. To highlight my base layer, I'm using Ice Yellow. I could use an ivory or a white, but I think they'd be a little bit too cold, a bit too desaturated for what I want. So I'm going to dry brush this on, focusing on the top where the light would fall and trying to pick that up just a little bit from the right hand side as you view it. I'll get colour all over the place because I want to make sure I picked out all of the details, but really focusing on getting it brighter at the top of the hood. I'll also focus on things like the ends of the robes and looking to start to build up some nice graduation of colour. And here we have the finished undercoat layer. It's ready for some contrast paint to go over the top now. I'm going to use Militarum Green from Citadel. It's desaturated, it's a green colour, it works great for the skin, and I'm going to put that straight on, carefully, but straight on where all the skin areas are. I want to make sure I don't go onto the robes because it'll mean dark patches appear as soon as I start to put that on. It's an easy job this, it just takes one coat and it's done. And with the skin finished, it's time to move on to the robes. The robes are a trickier colour. They're that sort of desaturated red pink. So I'm going to make a mixture of contrast paints for this, with Gulliman Flesh as the base, Blood Angel's Red to give that redness, and then a bit of Celestian Blue just because it's a slightly purple colour. I'm going to thin this down as well, and you can see here I'm mixing it up in my palette. That on the right hand side is some contrast medium with my mix. It's about 2 parts Gulliman Flesh, 1 part Blood Angels, and then just a couple of spots of the dark blue colour in there as well. Thinned down, it goes on really nicely. It's quite a subtle colour, but it works well with the icy yellow brushed over that whole red base, and the robe colour, it's pretty much done. So with a grey base to finish it off, that could be the miniature done. I think that would look great on the tabletop. Let's see how it stacks up against the original paint colour scheme from the artwork. So we were aiming for desaturated green and a slightly pinker colour. Let's see how it looks now. Using the colour picker, we can see that we've got closer to that green. It's a little bit richer, but the robe colour is looking good. If you're still watching, you're here for the advanced level stuff, and we're going to push the contrast between the highlights and the shadows, starting off with olive green and Nurgling Green paints, and we're going to use that to push the skin. I've got really thin paint here, and I'm always brushing upwards towards where I want the brightest part to be. You can see that starting off on the calf area on the leg here, and this is just with that olive green. Because the paint's quite thin, you're going to need to do this a few times, but you can see that it's starting to build up. The colour's getting a bit smoother, and it's starting to get a little bit paler, a little bit lighter towards the top of the calf and the top of the thigh. Now I've moved to the brighter green, the Nurgling Green, and I'm pushing that only right at the very tops of the areas that I want to remain bright. It's still very thin, I'm still painting it carefully in multiple layers to build up a nice smooth highlight. So that's the skin done, and you can see those highlights started to make the miniature pop a little bit better. The robes still look okay, but we can improve them. For the shadows, I'm using Rhinox Hide, and for the highlights, using Kislev Flesh. To start with, that Rhinox Hide really thinned down and only brushed in where I want those shadows to be. This is the most important part of this stage, that you choose where you want the shadows to be. I'm not only putting them into the cracks and the recesses, I'm also taking my inspiration from the artwork and painting some of the areas on the robes darker to contrast with the bits that I want to be lighter later on. I always tend to, when I'm painting like this, to push the paint, push the pigment towards the darker areas or the lighter areas, whichever I'm working on, and you can see there right up at the top under the shoulder and right down where that bit of robe joins in the other one, and pushing those shadows to make it appear to be a bit more 3D than it is. On the side of the hood here, I'm going for quite a distinct shadow just on this side because I want it to appear as though the light is falling from the other side. So I've stepped away from the artwork, the original artwork, a little bit here because I wanted a bit more richness in the robes. So I've chosen a new colour. This is Vallejo Wine Red, very, very thin, and pushing in just really in the mid-tone areas, and it gives a richness to the red, a pinkness, which I think looks really good. Now the stage following this one is highlighting using Kislev Flesh. I've done a little bit of it at this point, but unfortunately I've lost all the video of me actually doing it and picking out the highlights. The process though is exactly the same as doing it for the skin. You just get your lighter colour and push it towards those lighter areas. Bit of edge highlighting in there as well, just to make sure. So there you have it, 3 different versions, from the easiest on the left, then your slightly harder one in the middle, and then if you want to, pushing all those highlights and the contrast, I think it looks so much better. That extra pink you can see in the robes really helps. And if we compare that to the original artwork again, here it comes, you can see that I think the new style looks a lot closer to that, and it looks great on the table. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.